In this video, I'm going to teach you how to create a Danko style animation just like this. First, we need a cool ball and some cool circles to scale from this ball. Then a camera change and maybe a clock hand. And then finish with some particles. So let's get to it. So I actually went through one of the animations on Danko's channel and pulled out a few bits I quite liked. Now, I will admit this is definitely heavily inspired, but we will be animating this and it just gives me a base to work on seeing as I'm not Danko's voice. So I've basically built a kind of script that will help teach us some cool techniques. This will give me the chance to teach you a lot of cool stuff and hopefully you'll learn something awesome. So I've basically done a voice recording of this script and it sounds like this. First, we need a cool ball and some cool circles to scale from this ball. Then a camera change and maybe a clock hand. And then finish with some particles. Now you'll notice I also have a few script panels open here, but for the purposes of this video, in case you don't have those, I will be using just the standard After Effects tools, but these scripts are free as well. So I'm just going to start by adding markers to my timeline so I know exactly where my shots change. And this is super easy to do. Now I could do this inside this comp. All I've done is chopped this voiceover up, but by pressing tab and it'll bring up this flowchart, I can go back to my main comp and I'm just going to do it in here for ease so I can see it while animating. First, we need a cool ball. So that's the end of the first shot. So I'm just going to come over to this button here, which will create a marker at that moment in time where my cursor is. And some cool circles to scale from this ball. And again, end of shot 2. Then a camera change. End of shot 3. And press that marker button again. And maybe a clock hand. End of shot 4. And then finish with some particles. And then we're just into the last one. So I'm not going to mark that up. So, as the voiceover says, let's start with a cool ball. So the first thing I should note is my composition is set to 1080 by 1920. That's a portrait size that's used on TikTok, Instagram Reels, YouTube Shorts, all that kind of stuff. And we're going to go ahead and create a new solid by pressing Control or Command and Y. And it's just going to be a black solid. And I'm just going to add that to my scene. And I'm just going to press Enter to rename that. And we'll just call that BG. I'm going to lock that layer off so I don't accidentally select it by pressing the padlock button. Go up to my shape layers here. I'm going to hold and click it and select the ellipse tool. And I'm just going to hold Control and Shift in the center of my comp and create a circle. Holding Control and Shift will do it from where my cursor is and also create an even circle. Now you will notice my anchor point is out here as well. So I'm going to press Control, Alt and Home, which will center my anchor point. And Control and Home to then center that layer to the center of my composition. And press Enter on this shape layer 1 and just rename that to Ball 01. And now I want to change this from a stroke to a fill. So I'm just going to go to my fill and make that white. And then on my stroke, I'm going to click the stroke and change that to a no stroke. So let's get the position animating on this. So we're going to start by going to the end point of my marker here where the shot 1 ends. I'm going to press P on my keyboard to bring up my position properties and press the stopwatch to create a keyframe. I'm going to go back to 0 seconds and I'm just going to drag this ball down while holding Shift on my keyboard to create a nice straight line down. I'm going to select both of my keyframes and press F9. This will ease them. And I'm going to go into my graph editor by pressing the graph editor button here. Fit this to graph with the third icon in the middle there. And now we can see all of it. And I'm just going to hold Alt and scroll wheel to zoom out. And on my end ease, I'm going to really bring this out as I want this to come to kind of a slow stop. And maybe we'll kind of have a slightly fast in and we'll see how that looks. First, we need a cool ball. And now that's super slow, but obviously I'm doing it to the voiceover. If I wanted something with a bit more velocity, I'd probably shorten this and kind of do it like that, which looks really nice. The problem is this ball is just going to be stationary for a little bit. So for now, I'm going to bring this over and just leave it where it was. And I might adjust this in the future, but we're just gonna block that out. So really I've gone a step ahead because I know it's such a short animation, but I'm gonna go ahead now with the rest of it and just block these. So we need to create a bunch of circles that are going to come out from this circle. So I'm gonna press U twice on my ball layer here really fast to show me the size of the ball, and I'm actually just gonna change that to 200. And now I can create another circle layer. So I'm going to select my ball and press Control and D. I'm going to press U really fast twice again and just delete those position keyframes by repressing the stopwatch. I'm going to change my size of this to 400, so we go double on the X and the Y. If yours aren't linked, you can press this button here, which kind of looks like a paperclip, which means when you move them, they will move together with each other. And I'm just going to go up to my fill and change that to no fill. Go to my stroke, change that to white, and then make it 5 pixels. And now we need to line all of these up. So I'm going to turn on my grid here by pressing this button. I'm going to proportional grid. And I'm just going to create my circles all around this ball. And I kind of just want the edge to all kind of overlap in the center of this main ball here. I'm going to rename this layer to circle. And I'm going to press Ctrl and D to duplicate that. And I'm just going to go around and kind of in the corners too. I want a circle almost on each edge as though we had an octagon, for instance. And I'm just going to keep duping this and bringing that round. So this time we'll go on the left. And if you hold Control, you can actually snap to the center of the ball there. And we get this kind of awesome looking flower petal thing almost. And what I'm going to do is select all of them and press U. And you'll notice if we were to now scale this, it's going to scale from the center or position. And we don't really want that. So I'm going to change my anchor point on all of these layers so they're all central to the ball. So to do that, I'm going to press Y on my keyboard to bring up the Move Anchor Point tool. Just going to hold Control like it did and snap that to the center of my ball. And I'll go ahead and do this for every circle. So now I have all my anchor points central. If I were to scale this layer, you'll notice it will go towards the anchor point, which is exactly what I'm wanting. I'm wanting these balls to kind of scale out from the center rather than being on their own axis. So I'm going to do just that. When we get to this marker here, I'm going to press Alt and left square bracket to trim my layer. And I'm just going to recolor these as well to be orange. And at the end of the shot, I'm going to go Alt and right square bracket and just trim that to match the end. So we kind of have that blocked out before I get too ahead with the scales. And then here, we're going to need a camera adding to do a little movement. So what I'm going to do, jump to Layer, New, and Camera. We're just going to add that in. And then we're going to create a new null object as well for our camera. So Layer, New, Null Object. And I'm just going to rename that to Cam Control. And make that a 3D layer. And I'm just going to parent my camera to that null object. Now, the reason I do this is it makes it easier for positional movements with a camera, should we need them. Nothing's actually 3D at the moment, so nothing is being affected in our layer stack. But say I make that ball 3D, you'll now notice we can move the position easily. If we move the position on the camera, you'll notice it actually kind of rotates around the ball instead, which isn't what we want. So it's doing the opposite, and we kind of have to rotate around, which isn't really what I'm after. It just makes it much easier to use a null for that. So the next scene, we need to create a clock. So I'm just going to block out a quick circle there. So again, go to my circle tool and in the center, holding Control and Shift, just kind of drag that out for a nice big thing. And I'll maybe make this a bit thicker, pen stroke. And again, Alt and left square bracket to trim that. And then at the end, Alt and right square bracket. And we can change that layer color as well. Something different, just so we know where we are. I won't go pink because that's my camera. Go to purple, and I'm going to drag this underneath. I like my camera sitting at the top. Then a camera change, and maybe a clock hand. And then finish with some particles. Now I'm going to leave the particles for now, till last, because that's kind of more of a finishing touch. So we don't need to worry about that. I've kind of just put in a few objects that I need. And we'll draw out these clock hands as well while we're at it. So I'll rename this to clock face. And then we'll go to our pen tool here and just create a nice dialed hand. I'll rename that clock hand. And we'll just drag that above our clock face. And again, Alt and right, left square bracket to trim there, and Alt and right square bracket. Now, when you do Alt and right square bracket, it will trim one frame ahead, which is why I kind of go back a frame and then do it. It's just something to be aware of. So we kind of have it blocked in a way. It's not a full block. It's not going to be that complex of an animation that I think it requires it. So let's go back to our circles. I know it's been a bit all over the place, but it's sometimes I just kind of work sporadically, and I might just get tracked, like just think about something else while I'm in the moment. And it just gives me an idea on timings and stuff, and I need to know when I'm cutting things, moving to the next shot. So with these circles, we're going to select all of them. I'm going to click the first one, and then holding shift, I'm going to click the top one. I'm going to press S on my keyboard to bring up my scale properties, and we're going to create a keyframe there. I'm just going to hold Alt and Shift, and then my right arrow, maybe 3 times, just to move those keyframes along. Go to my scale and 0. I'm going to select all these keyframes, hit F9, go to my graph editor by pressing this button here, and select them. And I want this to be quite a fast movement, so I'm going to take all the easing off the front and add it all to the end. So I have a really slow out. And you'll notice that this looks really boring because they're all happening at once. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move forward 4 frames by pressing Control and right arrow from the start of my layers. 4. And then Alt and right square bracket. So that actually makes it 5 frames because of the 1 frame on the end. I'm going to select these from bottom to top and go to Animation, Keyframe Assistant, and Sequence Layers. Hit OK, and that will just create a nice sequence layers for us. So I'm going to go back to the end of my shot and Alt and right square bracket. And now we get a nice sequenced effect instead. Now that might be a bit slow, so I could just select all of these and bring them back 10 frames or so and see how that looks. But again, we're coming to a stop, and that's not what we want. It looks quite boring again. So we're going to go ahead and create a null for these circles. So I'm going to go to Layer, New, Null Object. I'm going to bring this below my, just above my circles, and I'm going to call that Circle Control. I'm going to select all my circles again, and with the pick whip, parent it to my Circle Control. And I'll just trim this null with the Alt and right square bracket on the end, and Alt and left square bracket on the start, just to parent them off. So you'll notice everything's still the same, and null is centered, which is exactly what I'm wanting. And I want to add some rotation to this. So I'm going to create a keyframe on my rotation by pressing R to bring that up on my null object. And I'm going to go ahead, and by the end circle being on, I want to have done 1 rotation. I'm just typing 1 on the left parameter. And I'll leave the easing for now. Then we're going to go forward to maybe this 5-second mark and add a 90 degrees to this. So I want the circles to still be moving. And then at the end, I want to do another 180. So I'll change this to 270. I'm going to select all of them keyframes, press F9 to easy ease them, go back to our graph editor. And this is where I don't really like the look of the speed graph. So I'm actually going to press this second button in and change to a value graph. Because what I'm wanting is smooth curves here. You'll notice if I play this with the easing, it's going to rotate and then stop and then rotate and stop, because this graph is coming to a flat peak, which is not what I want. And thinking about it, I could probably delete this keyframe in the middle because I don't really need it. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that one. And I'm going to bring this top one down because I want that to be quite fast. And then in the middle here, I'm just going to create a slight slant on both of those. So it'll slow down a little, but it won't come to a complete stop. And again, I kind of want to slow ease, and maybe it comes fast at the start. So we've got this kind of weird looking curve going on. And if I play that now, it'll come out really fast and rotate really fast, come to a slow, and then it'll speed off again. And some cool circles to scale from this ball. So the speed off works, but the start is definitely too slow. So I'm going to bring this curve up a bit more and ease those out as well. And maybe pull this one down. And you'll notice because we don't actually have any flat peaks anymore, it's not coming to a complete stop. And some cool circles to scale from this ball. Then a carrot. And some cool circles. Now we're actually not seeing anything happening with this rotation because it's happening too fast. So I'm actually going to add some easing to that instead and see how that looks. So we get a kind of a slower start. And some cool circles to scale from this ball. It's a bit better. Perhaps I need to select all of these and just bring them up so we get more of a rotation to look at, which could give a bit more interesting result. And some cool circles to scale from this. It's definitely too much, so let's bring them back down. So we were at 360. So let's go a bit more, maybe 500-ish. And some cool circles to scale from this ball. Just feels odd. So what's 360? We want to take that up to 180 really, I think. Ish, and see how that looks. And I'll just ease this out more. And some cool circles to scale from this. And some cool circles to scale from. It's not the intended effect I'm after. I'm going to take that easing back off. Much better. Sometimes it's just a case of playing around until you get the effect that you need. So that's the kind of circles that I'm after. Now at the end here, I actually want these to some cool circles to scale from this ball. So what I'm going to do is, in line with this rotation starting again, I'm going to select all my circles. I'm going to press P on my keyboard to bring up my position. And I'm going to create a new keyframe by pressing the stopwatch. I'm going to go to the end of the rotation. And I'm going to press Control, Alt, and Home to center my anchor point. And you'll notice we've kind of got the opposite of what we want. So I'm actually going to select them all, right click, keyframe assistant, and time reverse keyframes. And now they're all in the right place and they all go back to the middle, which is perfect. It's exactly what I want. I'm going to select them all, F9, and go to my speed graph for this one and fit that to view. Zoom out a little. And I want a very slow ease into that position. So I'm going to ease the front end, really pull them out, and then pull this back end quite far back. And see how that looks. Scale from this ball. Then they kind of disappear, which looks quite nice. Scale from this ball. But I don't want them to disappear. I kind of just want them to come to the middle, because I want to create like a tunnel when we do this camera move. So I'm actually going to add some easing to the end. Maybe a little bit. And we'll just see how that looks. Scale from this ball. Then scale from this ball. Maybe a bit more. Or maybe actually I'll switch the easing and bring the forward one in. Scale from this ball. Then scale from this ball. Scale from this ball. That's quite nice. Obviously I'm getting fed up of hearing my voice, but it's what you have to do. A lot of this is honestly just trial and error. So now we're going to have a camera change, and I actually want these to kind of stay where they are, but I'm going to do something called a match cut, so we can create a kind of tunnel effect that I saw in one of these videos where you have these circles drop down. I think that was a really nice effect. Or we could kind of zoom through them circles and have the ball zoom through and finish on the clock. Either or could be quite nice. But I'm going to start by just creating 3D layers of all of these. Select all my circles and make them 3D layers by pressing the 3D button here. Press U on my keyboard. And on my camera control, I want to change the rotation and position. I'm going to press R and then Shift and P to bring up the position as well. And I actually want to see two views here, just so I can see how my camera moves. So I want the right view and my active camera view. So what I'm wanting to do is my camera to kind of rotate upwards over the top of the ball. Kind of like it's creating a floor rather than, well, we're kind of above now, but I kind of want it to look like it's more horizontal on rather than above. So let's see how this is going to rotate. I'm actually going to take the 3D off my ball because I don't want my ball to change. So when we orient, it kind of looks like that's moving. And that's exactly what we want. So I just need to change my X position here. So I'm going to create a keyframe, move forward maybe 20 frames. And now I've lost where I am. So I'm just going to extend all these layers, Alt and right square bracket. And let's see how much we need to adjust that. So maybe 70 perhaps. And I can also edit the position here. So I'm going to create a new keyframe and just drag that back to line up with my other one. And then I want the Y to drop. So it comes below the ball and we get that kind of floor look, like it's kind of sitting on the floor. It looks a bit nicer. Again, I'm going to select both these, F9, and add some easing on both sides to this one for a nice smooth ease to this. And we'll see how that looks. That looks super weird because it's almost like the ball isn't moving. And it's kind of swinging underneath, which I'm not a lover of. I don't like the arc there. Then a camera change, but I don't hate it. And there's something cool we can do with this. So I'm actually going to dupe one of these circles and press Control D. I'm going to bring that above. And maybe that will serve as one of my clock faces. or not. So I'm going to trim the end of these by pressing Alt and right square bracket and just bring that back. And then on this one, I'm going to Alt left square bracket. And if I switch between the frames, you'll notice the difference in thickness, which is not what I'm after. So I might just increase the thickness on this to make up for that. We go up to 10 maybe on the stroke thickness. I don't want it to be visible that my layers are actually changing. And we could also move this back so it kind of happens at the same time, so you're not going to notice it. So now you don't notice the circles changing, which is something called a match cut, which is a really cool technique. But I'm gonna come back to this in a second. On this angle here, I'm gonna dupe the circle maybe 3 times, and I want to create the effect of this tunnel. So I'm gonna bring this up on the Z-axis, which is the blue one here. And I'm going to bring number 11 up as well. I will kind of see how that plays out. See if they're still... Okay, so they're still aligned at the top, which is exactly what we want. And you can see that ball then sits in it. I might just that ease in because it kind of looks like it's almost swinging. What I'm also going to do is control... I'm going to select my ball layer because you'll notice this is now behind. And it looks weird with these rings coming sort of in front of it, which I don't like. I'm going to select my ball layer and Control Shift and D to split that. And just bring that above my circle layers. Which actually could be the wrong way. But now we get that depth look to it instead. And on these layers, I kind of want them to drop down almost. I'm just going to bring my ball 2 back and my ball 1 back as well, so they cut on this camera move. And as this is moving, I'm just going to alter my Z parameter. I'm going to select my circles, hit P. And we've already got them keyframed from the other movements. I can delete those off. But I want them start positions. And then at the end, I'm just going to bring these Z positions down to 0. So they kind of drop with us. And I'm going to do some similar easing again, F9, and fit to view. I think I've done it wrong. So I want to Control Z that because I've not actually changed my Z position at the front anymore. So let me just check what the Z positions were. So I actually want to time reverse these keyframes. Right click, time reverse keyframes. And I want this one to drop a little bit as well. So we'll go like -40 on that, perhaps. And make sure the cut's still okay. So it's a bit thicker now. We could reduce that stroke thickness or change the timing of the cut. We'll see how it looks. I want that to happen a little later than the camera turn. So you kind of see that perspective happening. And there you go. We're kind of getting that drop happening. So I want that drop to be quite instant. So I'm going to select all the keyframes, F9, go to my graph editor. And we're going to instant drop them. So bring these ones out. And really there wouldn't be an ease on the end. It would actually go the other way, I think. And it would kind of ease up, wouldn't it? Because things speed up as they drop, as they fall in time. So yeah, let's do that. And obviously these layers need extending out so we can see what's going on. Then a camera change and maybe then a camera. I'm a bit early on this camera change. So I'm just going to drag this over a little bit to where my voice says it. My marker was wrong and drag these layers out instead. And we will redo the cut in kind of the middle of this camera. So these one dragging over as well. Kind of here. We want the cut to happen. Just so it's not too obvious, because we'll be in the middle of the motion on this ball. Then a camera change, and we kind of get that. Now this is actually super low, but I kind of want these to maybe be a bit above. We get more of a drop. Then a camera change. Then a camera change. Just creates a cool tunnel effect. And if you wanted, you could extend this out and ease into that. Camera change, and maybe I'll just bring it out. And a camera change, and maybe and then we need that clock. A camera change, and maybe so we can scale up for this clock here to match that. So I'm just going to bring this back, just so I know where to go. And when these all connect, I'm just going to alt and right bracket on those, because I just want to keep the bottom one. Go to my scale parameter by pressing S, and we're just going to scale that up to match our clock hand. Go back 1 frame so I can still see everything. And we're just going to scale that up to meet our clock hand. I'll F9 those, graph editor, and just add some easy ease on both sides of this. Then a camera change, and so that tunnel is camera change. Way too weird now on the position. I'm going to bring up my position properties again. See how that looks. And a camera change. I actually don't like those falling the way they are. So I'm going to add some easing to the front too. And the back. They're all kind of different as well. So I'm just going to reduce the front easing. Add some to the back. So they're almost like floating down, I guess. They won't be as abrupt. Then a camera change. Looks a bit nicer. A camera change. Then a camera change. And I'm just going to trim these end ones off again where that keyframe ends. Then a camera change. And that scale is happening super fast. So I'm going to bring up some scale properties and just extend out, Alt, Shift, and right arrow, just to bring that out. And see how that looks. And maybe bring that over a tad as well. So we just get a few frames of a breather. And a camera change. And so I'm going to turn that clock off, just so I can see what's going on with this. I'm not liking how it's flowing at the minute. And camera change. Camera change. I kind of want them to overlap almost, so maybe I'll bring that back. And then we want to start animating that clock. And now I could actually extend that scale to match. Then a camera change. And maybe a clock. So I'm actually just going to delete that clock face. I don't need it anymore. So I'm going to rename this circle 9 to clock face instead. I don't need it. It's kind of made redundant by this other circle. And then we can have our clock hand kind of animating out here. So to do this, you'll notice we're on this 3D perspective. Now I could, instead of I could have pre-comped this with the clock face, which would have made more sense. It wouldn't be affected by this 3D. But I don't need to worry too much. So what I'm going to do is bring up my rotation properties. And I might actually split these out to make this easier. I'm just going to press U twice really fast. But I've drawn them as one path, which potentially isn't the best way to do this. So because what's going to happen is if I rotate these, they're going to move together at the same speed, which isn't really what I want necessarily. So I'm going to delete this and I'm going to have to create a new path. So I'm going to duplicate it, sorry. And I'm just going to alter my path. So I'm going to, on the first one, just going to bring that in so we get that hour hand. And then on number 2, I'm going to bring this one down so we get the minute hand. And that way, it means I can animate them separately. So we'll call that, is this minute or hour? Now, really, the best way to kind of do this would have been to animate it in a pre-comp. So I might do just that. If I was to turn this 3D off and then back on, we could just animate it flat and then do it in 3D as well. There's so many different ways to do things. It's kind of just what works best for you. But a lot of the time I don't actually pre-comp stuff because sometimes I just don't see the benefit. So with this, I'm going to first trim paths these on to animate them on. So we're going to add on this button here and trim paths. Just going to open that up, and on the end, I'm going to create a keyframe, drag that over to maybe 8 seconds or so, and then just set the end to 0. And I'll just add some normal easing to that. I'm not going to go into the easy easing. I'll leave that up to you and let you play about with that for yourself. Then I'm just going to copy the whole trim paths by pressing Ctrl C and just paste that to my hour hand as well. And let's see how that looks. So they animate out together. And it's kind of the direction I'm wanting. So I'm going to rotate my minutes using an expression instead. So I'm going to press R on my keyboard to bring up my rotation, Alt and click the stopwatch, and we're just going to type in time times, let's go with 400. See how fast that moves. They're moving kind of fast. It definitely could move faster. And you'll notice now this trim path is kind of moving the wrong way. So I'm actually going to select this minute hand, press U really fast twice, and change the direction by changing the path direction and pressing that button here. So now this will animate around. And we can obviously speed that up by just changing the expression there. But on the hour hand, I'm going to do the same thing. I'll click the stopwatch, and we're going to do time times 100. So it kind of moves at like a quarter speed of the other one, which might be too fast, and we could probably drop that maybe a bit more to 50. And I like the look of that. So I'm going to turn 3D back on, and they'll just sit back in their original positions. And maybe a clock hand. And then finish with some particles. And now we just need to add some particles and stylize this. So I'm going to bring these out. And I don't really like... I mean, we could reverse the camera, or we could just scale that in. It might be nice to reverse the camera and scale it. It'll look quite cool. So I'm going to select both these camera keyframes, Control C and then Control V. Right click, keyframe assistant, time reverse keyframes. And I'll bring that over a little bit so we kind of get that rotation up. I'm just going to drag all of these out as well, so I know how much I've actually got to play with. So we kind of have this cool animation going on. So I just want to add some particles and basically get this clock off screen. Now there's tons, of course, we could add to this to make it look much better, but I'm already running a pretty long tutorial here, and we still got to stylize everything as well. So let's get to doing that. So we have this nice reverse now, and I just want to get these animated off. So I'm going to press U on my keyboard, bring up my keyframes, going to select both of them. You can only do one at a time and only in After Effects. Control C, Control V, right click, keyframe assistant, time reverse, and the same on this one. Keyframe assistant, time reverse, and they'll now trim path back in. And on our clock face, I'm going to do the exact same thing. So I'm just going to select both of them, Control C, Control V, right click, keyframe assistant, time reverse keyframes. And I actually want that to go to 0. And then finish, and then finish. I don't like how that's moving, and I quite want that to be a bit delayed actually as we come over this clock hand. I'm going to use Alt to shift my keyframes about, Alt and right arrow key. Looks a bit too stepped now, so I'll perhaps just bring it back. It's important that I don't want to have everything come to complete stop, but I also don't want it to be too stepped. Like you have that animation, then you have that animation, like that. And it makes it also causes problems, doesn't look as smooth. It's all about how everything flows. It's a really interesting thing, definitely, that you'll kind of begin to learn when things don't look right, or they certainly don't feel right. So I'm just going to affect that easing, F9, and we'll have a nice ease on that, and it can be smooth out. We'll see how that looks. Now, we really should be adding movement to this circle because it looks really boring at the minute. Like here, we could have the ball drop down and then bounce back up, and we could add bouncing to this. But I will leave that to you and your own devices of how to kind of take this a step further. So let's create some particles now. So I'm going to create a new layer, new and solid. And it can be any color, it doesn't matter. I'm going to call this particles. Now we're going to add effect and generate, is it under? It is not, could be under simulation. Yep, simulation and CC particle world. And now you'll see we have this, which is definitely not what we want. So let's change all of this. So in our physics, we can use explosive, that's fine, I think. We'll turn gravity off to 0. And in our particle, we'll go with faded sphere. I'm just going to change these colors to like a white and a gray, kind of suit the style. And then we can play with all these radiuses as well, make this a bit bigger. And of course, feel free to kind of play with all of these settings. I mean, there's a bunch of different stuff in here. A fire might actually work better here. We get that kind of wiggly, kind of sine wavy motion, which is quite nice for what we're after. And I want this to sit below the ball. So I'm going to go and bring this down to ball 02. See how that looks. So that's going to come up. And then we can kind of trim this layer to where we need it. Now, rather than pressing Alt and right square bracket, I'm just going to press left square bracket, sorry. I'm just going to press left square bracket. And we can see how that animates. And now it kind of brings itself on, which is quite nice. I really don't like that fire, actually. It's pretty horrendous. Let's change it back to explosive and see what happens. And you kind of get that particle coming on itself. And that kind of motion similar to what you get in the background here. Now, obviously, if we had more circles animating and whatever else, we can definitely reduce the amount of these. You can change the birth rate, how long they're on for. So maybe I don't want as many on. Change the size of them, make them a bit smaller. And what would be quite nice to do is almost have it as though this ball is going down this tunnel with these particles. So I'm going to press S on my keyboard to bring up scale. And I'm going to bring that from the start, and at the end, we're just going to kind of scale that up. Or we could scale it down, either way, as though it's kind of zooming off. Might be nice to zoom it off into the distance at the end. So we'll kind of create one in the middle, where it's a bit smaller, and I want to drag that out. At the end, select them all, F9, go to graph editor, and for this, I'm going to use my value graph, hit to view. And I kind of want like a small linear motion. So this ball's almost moving a little bit. And at the end, I want it to ramp up and zoom off into the distance. That's what I'm going for here. Almost like we're moving through space. I'm going to bring this out, zoom that off. Maybe we could even drop that to 0, but we'll see how that looks. So you kind of get that look as it's zooming off into the distance. And I actually want that to go to 0 instead. And maybe this can be like 50. So we kind of get a faster move here. And now you'll notice my curves have changed. So we'll just have to redo those. And just make this one linear again. And then zooms off. But you'll notice it looks very boring. And it looks nothing like this. And we need glows. We need lots of glows. And we could stylize it even further and add smears to the ball and everything like that. I'm going to show you exactly how to stylize it. So we are going to create a new adjustment layer with Control Alt and Y. And I'm just going to call this glow. Now, you could use a plugin here called Deep Glow, which is a paid plugin. But if you don't have that, we can just use Stylized Glow. I'm going to add that. And we really want to crank this. So let's increase the glow radius, decrease the threshold, and we can maybe make that a bit more intense. And I want a wild radius on this first one. And then I'm going to dupe this, so we get double glow, and then increase the radius on it, decrease the intensity. Let's say that's like 0.3. And I just want to see that on its own, so we get that secondary glow behind it, to give us that really glowed out look. Now, maybe I want to increase the threshold on this. I'm just going to solo that second glow so I can kind of see how far that's traveling. So I really want a soft kind of glow behind everything. And you can layer these up and maybe create an even softer one at 0.1. Increase the radius some more. Increase the threshold. And just play about with these until you kind of get your desired look, or use something like Deep Glow, which is definitely what they're using here to create that really glowy effect. Now I'm going to create a new adjustment layer with Control Alt Y. I'll just call this CC for color correction. It's just kind of the term that I use. And we're going to add some noise to this. So I'm just going to add a noise. Sorry, I'm so used to using a shortcut. This is called FX Console by Video Copilot, and it's a free plugin I would highly recommend. I'm going to create a noise. And we're going to add 20. Maybe go with 10. Now, this is just my own kind of version of how I would stylize things a bit further. Maybe go with 5. Just creates a bit more interesting look. It's definitely not on the originals, but I like the kind of graininess of it. And a couple more that you could add if you wanted to, which is definitely not the Danco style. And you'll notice I've got a slightly lighter background as well. So I could change that to full black. Just edit in my solid. A full black doesn't actually exist in real life, which is why I went for a slightly different one. But with a full black, it makes a whole different look. And maybe I can increase that noise again. for 5. I really like the kind of look we're getting now. And what I would do to take this another step further is use another free plugin called Quick Chromatic Aberration. And this will create a really nice effect where if I just take off these glows, we begin to get the reds, greens and blues all separating, and you can just quickly change that. And it just creates that look of an actual film camera as you would get in an actual real life. And I'm going to add that on and layer that up. Again, it's not essential. This is definitely not something that is used in the animations, but it's nice to make things your own. So I've just gone ahead and spent 20 minutes just finessing this animation, adding a bit more movement to the ball to make it look more alive, just adjusting some of the timing off camera, which is something I'd highly recommend you do to hone in on your own skills. I'll show you exactly what I've made now, and I'll just add a couple minutes just to break it down for you as well. First, we need a cool ball and some cool circles to scale from this ball. Then a camera change and maybe a clock hand. And then finish with some particles. First, so I'll just break down everything that I've changed just to give you an idea and help get you started on your own changes to such an animation. So on this intro ball, you'll notice there's a bit more movement going on. And all I've done is added a simple overshoot to this. So my ball on the Y, we can just ignore those X keyframes. To get separate dimensions, you can right click your position and click separate dimensions. On my Y, I've just had it overshoot a bit more past the center and then just ease back to the middle, just to create a more interesting start, and then it kind of settles to its rest place a bit after, and it keeps things moving, keeps things more flowy and interesting. And then this is all still the same. The only difference is on the end where this circles begin to come inwards, we have this kind of pulsing circle that goes outwards. This is just a scale on opacity, simply just scales up and fades off as it's scaling up. This is something I actually went back and checked out some of Danko's shots, and there seems to be this kind of like pulsating circle happening quite a lot. So I just added a few of them in. One of the biggest changes is definitely this shot here. Now, I felt like the ball just wasn't moving enough and it looked really weird. So what I've done actually is extended the distance between these 3 circles that we have going on, these 3 clock face circles. And I've also offset their position keyframes down just a little bit by 2 frames just before they come together. And the main thing here is this ball. So when the camera is turning, this ball position is actually changing. So this begins to turn, and sorry, that's the clock face. Let me find the ball 2 layer. It's this one here. This ball, you'll notice, is changing at the same time, and that's coming up in space just to add a bit more movement. The ball felt far too static for a camera change. If you imagine, the perspective would shift a little bit, and obviously it wasn't a 3D layer, so it wouldn't do it automatically. So that just shifts up and around, and then the ball just drops with the layers and does its own bounce. And then we have a couple more of these circle pulses. Again, it's just a dupe of that original circle. I've honestly not been too over the top with my layer naming, I'll be honest. I would highly recommend a bit of tidying in this project. But again, I've done a scale and opacity on each one. And then on the reverse of this, I've done the same thing. So I've taken my ball position, now it's been lower. And as this camera moves back up, it's still the exact same movement on the camera. I've changed nothing on the cameras whatsoever, just add a bit more movement to everything else. The ball kind of comes up with it back to central position. And the exact same is happening on this clock face too. And you'll notice the clock hands move with it as well. And all I've done is I animated that clock face, and at the start, I just selected both my clock hands and parented them to my clock face using the pick whip. And then that just comes around, and I added a full fade out to the end on the particles as well. And those were the only changes I made. It just helps create a bit more rhythm and a bit more flow into the animation. And obviously you can see it really makes a big difference to the overall look. So I'd highly recommend you experiment with this for yourself, and let me know how you get on in the comments below. And if there's any other styles that you'd like to see, or anything in particular you'd like to learn in After Effects. However, if you want to learn some more After Effects techniques, you can go ahead and watch this video next.